Hey everybody. Whew. Hey y'all. Welcome to part 2 of the Octavia Butler mixtape course. I'm Dr. Brianna Whiteside and we are starting Butler's Parable of the Sower. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? Hey. Welcome back to part 2 of the Octavia Butler mixtape course. Let me know if y'all can hear me. I was gonna try to join on my computer, but apparently it's not working. So let me know if y'all can hear me up over here, so that we can go ahead and get started. Y'all, of course, if you all want to join the panel and let us know how you feel about Butler's Parable of the Sower, then feel free to click those 2 little people at the bottom of the screen to join the panel. We have, I was just reflecting on this as we wait for more people to come on. Thank you, June, July. I was reflecting on our progress so far in Butler's universe, and we have literally read, is this the 7th book? I think this is the 7th book, right? Wild to Eat, Might of My Mind, Survivor, Clay's Arc, Pattern Master, Kindred. Yeah, we've literally read 7 Butler books. Well, this is the 7th book. It is not an easy read, but it is a very serious read. That's what I should say. It's a very serious read. It is one that I'm always fascinated that when people say, this was my first Butler introduction and I love it, I'm always shocked because I'm like, yo, if this was my first Butler introduction, I don't know. It feels very immediate. It feels very urgent. It feels very serious. And she does deal with a lot of heavy things. In her notes, as well as in a lot of interviews, Butler had said that this book was a book full of problems, right? This book was a book full of problems, and that Parable of the Talents is where she would begin to unfold all of the solutions, or try to unfold all of the solutions. So I'm just trying to pull up these notes real quick. But as y'all hop on, please start liking the video. Come on, y'all, get those likes up for me. And if y'all want to join the live, and if y'all have not, if y'all have never joined and you want to share your thoughts, feel free to hop up here with us. We don't bite. We just kiki just a little bit. How did y'all enjoy y'all break? Phil says, I read this and it was way too depressing. Someone said it's depressing. I totally get that. Sir Maxim says break well needed for sure. I think we're also going to look, y'all, I'm running out of steam. So I got to be honest and say that I'm going to try to get us to through the Xenogenesis trilogy. But we're definitely going to take another break after the series. We're definitely going to need it after the series. So let me see. I want to start this class off with a Butler quote. I'm going to try to give y'all one from the archive that I haven't given the Substacks yet. Let's see. Where can we find? Here's one that y'all may find interesting. So this is when Butler is talking about Lauren, and she says, who were Olamina's role models? Kennedy. She was born after JFK died, but she is much in love with the dream he seemed to espouse, humanity into space. Harriet must be one of her role models too. The Black woman, illiterate, physically handicapped, who managed to do so much incredibly throughout her life. She didn't know how not to lead. She was one who could see pain and need and shrug and not shrug her shoulders and walk away. So apparently, according to Butler, Lauren's role models were JFK and Harriet Tubman. Fun facts. I think that's very interesting, right? But yeah, y'all, we're in Butler's universe. I hope you all started to catch the parallels and some of the references that the pattern series were nudging us towards, or leading us towards, or dropping those little golden nuggets for this series. As I said, I think we were reading No, we were reading Clay's art that she started to nudge us towards Lauren's community, right? Or the life that Lauren would be living or we would be encountering in Parable of the Sower. So I hope you all started to brace yourselves and prepare yourselves to be in this world of humanity. Um, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Panel, how y'all doing? Hey, welcome back. How y'all feeling? Let me know. Let me know your thoughts about the book.
Yeah, I needed the break. Thank you so much. I I I don't know. This is like I loved when I okay, so when I first read this book, I absolutely loved it. And I loved it because I was like, it was very for me thinking through, oh, this is very logical, this makes sense. The stuff that happened, I liked Lauren at first. You know, I'm like, I like her. She's resourceful. She's not like blinded by all of this other kind of stuff or whatever else. But since it reminds me so much of all the craziness that's going on right now, it's
Yeah.
hard to read it and not think about it being prophetic as opposed to like the way she intended, which was like, I'm just looking at what happened in the past and projecting what could happen forward. I
Mhm.
know I logically understand that, but it hits so close to home for me right now. It's hard. And then on top of that, I went to go see Sinners. Who knows? Just it's a lot of stuff going on in my head. It's a lot.
Okay, I think that's fair, right? Because you're sometimes, and this is something I was working out when I did my Pace Interview magazine on this text. Like, I'm very honest. This is not my favorite series. It's a hard series for me. But I think now that we're reading it so close to the reality, it's hard not to reject it in a lot of ways. Now, some people do see it as, okay, this is your how-to guide. Sure, we can look at it that way. There are some positive takeaways that we can look at and look forward to, but when you're reading something that mirrors your reality that was written in published in 1993, I think she said that she was coming off of a 6 year writer's block, and she hadn't written anything worthy until she was able to finish fleshing through this series. So it's one thing to read it back then when we're not that close to it, and then it's another thing to read it when we're like inching very quickly towards that reality.
Yeah,
So that's
it's not even just the it's the dates, the years, when this stuff is happening. It's
yeah.
it's just like again, I think I read it back in the 90s with the 30 some years ago or whatever else. So this is so it back then it was like, oh yeah, that's not gonna happen. And
Yeah.
it just was a different and I took a completely different take about it because this series was one of my favorite ones. And I'm like, she's strong and she did blah blah blah. Now I'm just like, girl, do I gotta be a doomsday prepper? Like, what are you saying?
You stressed, Tina. You stressed. You
I'm
stressed.
stressed. I feel like I'm not doing enough to be prepared. I mean, just okay. I'm gonna stop now. I'm sorry, Veronica. I think I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're mirroring a lot of my thoughts as well. I just wanted to share kind of like an overarching thought that I had. So I read this book right before this class by myself. And this was kind of the thing that made me say, if I'm going to continue reading Octavia Butler, I need some support. I need some community to process. I
Yeah.
need somebody else who knows what I'm going through. But yeah, that was very much 2024 going into 2025. So I did feel a lot of that like doomsday prepper stuff. And obviously, this book is very bleak and visceral and real for a lot of the things that we are experiencing today. But an interesting perspective shift that I came away from with this read that I did not have last time is I think within the context of everything we've read. And I think it was last week's class, somebody was speaking about Octavia Butler being an not Afrofuturist, but yeah, Afro pessimist. Um, and interestingly, I feel like for as bleak and grim and awful as this book is, it almost is the most hopeful that we've read in
Okay.
the sense of our main character, her intentions, and where she wants to go. It almost does feel like it's providing this sense of hope that the other books and the other characters did not provide. However, given what we know about Octavia's universes that she creates and these characters, I'm now very concerned about where Lauren's ideals are going to take us. Lauren's ideals are going to take us because she is such a leader, and a lot of things that you shared on Substack. She has a vision, which is very hopeful, but I'm curious about how that's going to develop over time. Is she going to have disciples and with Earthseed and all that? So I'm just really curious to see how that's going to play out. But
And I like that you mentioned that it was a hope element there, because one of the I guess quotes that we can read now from the art. Well, I can read. Y'all don't have access to it from the archive. Is Butler does say, while she does say on the one hand that this book is a book of problems, she also says that Parable of the Sower is also a story of hope and of hard work and the development of a new philosophy for a new and difficult time. Yes, violent, drug-related things happen in it, as they happen in life, but the novel does not focus on people who make these things happen. It focuses on the people who strive to build better lives in spite of obstacles. It is both a cautionary tale and a novel of hope. So we should read this with that in mind, right? This is a novel of, hey, be careful. Y'all are going quickly in this direction. You may want to pump the brakes. And she even gave us, I think some of the stuff starts to happen in 2027. She gave us 2 more years to get there. And we're already, we're in 2025 and we're like, we don't want those extra years.
That's so funny you mentioned the 27 piece, because I first read this book before the election, but after July 2024, and I thought it was pretty prescient at the time. I went through the entire series, or just the 2 books in like a month or so, and I remember being like, ooh, this is, I wouldn't say scary, but it just felt too on the nose. And I guess I could say, yeah, to Veronica's point, there was a feeling of hope, because you can tell that even though Lauren, this teenage girl, is going through essentially the end of her world, she's planning for what's on the other side of it. And that was what I took from it, at least back then. And now that we are only, I don't even know, 100 days in, I'm always, there are so many ways we could have handled this differently, but we didn't. Yeah. Also, right around that time, either before the series or after the series, I read this book I think it's by William Howard and Neil Turner, whatever, called The Fourth Turning. So it talks about the 4 cycles that America has gone through in the span of a saeculum. A saeculum is 100 years. So every generation plays a role in the historical events of their time. And it was talking about how, and this was it was published in 1997, and it accurately predicted the pandemic that we went through. It accurately predicted the collapse, because we were due a fall of sorts. And so reading those 2 books together really just, and now here we are, and I'm like, oh, I hate when people are right. But I think they both really prepared me for where we are now. And to Tina's point, it just, I don't know if she was a prophet or if she really was just locked in that well on, this is what you can expect to happen. And I don't know. I don't know. I do think, at least for Octavia Butler's sake, she knew how to write a story that would be engaging and a warning. And she also could have done more in her interviews to say, hey, y'all, you should really take this seriously. But she didn't. So
Yeah. And then you know what? I like that you mentioned that because I think it has to do with personality, right? Like, yes, she was this writer who had this big voice and big presence, but she was very timid in a lot of ways. And then also like when you look at the archive, you'll notice that even as she's publishing the pattern series, there are bits and pieces of this parable series that show up in the 70s, in the 80s, even though it wasn't published until the 90s. And so she's writing all of these books at the same time. They show up in some of her journals. Maybe not as finished manuscripts, but there are bits and pieces where she starts to nod to this coming doom or this pending doom in Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And so I do wish she would have spoken more. I wish she would have had, we just would have had more of her, right? More information about her. Because sometimes even when you're going through the archive, if this book feels daunting, you can imagine what her archive feels like, right? It's very heavy. She was very depressed majority of the time, and I don't think she got a chance to clean out the archive before it went to the Huntington. Now they did restrict some of her papers and some sensitive things like that, but you get her authentic thoughts and you're in her head for such a long time. I think that's another reason why I put in the Substack. Like I really wanted an off ramp out of Lauren's head, because now that I reflect on it, what's inside of Lauren's head is inside of Butler's head at the same time. It's like they're living these dual lives. They're living the same life, but she's trying to live this life through her protagonist, if that makes sense.
One of the things when this book first came out and I went to see her at a reading, one of the things that she talked about a lot was about Earthseed, and talked about this philosophy and then how important it is to people to think their spiritual beliefs differently, or to see like can this be a philosophy that you go. And so when I first read the book in the 90s, I thought to myself, okay, this is about challenging, like, is God changed? Is change is God? Like, is that a belief system or philosophy I could get behind, or does that make sense? And so even though all of this bad stuff was happening, I just felt like the emphasis, or the thing that she appeared to be most concerned about, was people going to vilify her for coming up with essentially could be perceived as a new religion
Yeah.
or a new position. So like that was like it wasn't so much like like what was going to happen or whatever. It was, are people going to vilify her because she's coming up with a new philosophy, a new religion?
Yeah, and to that point, just to add more context about the Earth Seed, the archives kind of support that, or they show that the verses were actually kind of, Butler was trying to write poetry. And then she started with the Earth Seed to try to work through that religious trauma. And then it just happened to transfer into the text as these entries. And I think also in the notes, or no, it's in the book actually, she talks about the Book of the Dead, where she sees the Bible as the Book of the Dead in a way. But she wanted to write a book for the living people, right? And so she was timid to kind of release that poetry, which is why she released it as journal entries, or this creation of her protagonist's religion or solution for how humanity can progress. But she was trying to write poetry, and she was trying to work through her religious trauma, and then it just in some way lined up with her ideas in the text. All right, who else? Black Stoop Kid.
I was just trying to gather my thoughts, but I just wanted to say, like, I am the person who like brought up Afro pessimism at the last class, and one of the reasons that I brought it up and some of what I saw like in this text as well, the idea of like perpetual slavery and the recreation of slavery even after like supposed abolishment, is like a part of Afro pessimism as well. And we see that a little bit the company town. What's that town called?
Oliver.
Oliver, yeah. And how Lauren's dad was like, that's basically slavery, like we are not going there. And the fact that Lauren saw that too. But also another part of Afro pessimism is the like the basic idea that like for Black people, that I forgot the way that they phrase it, but it's basically that like there's not necessarily like room for improvement in terms of like our own social standing. And sometimes that can feel like, wow, like that really sucks. There's like no way that we can like have power in our own society. But I think in other ways it is also freeing to like see a reality and know that you need to work within it, which I think is like very much how Lauren operates. Even when she was talking to her stepmom, or like listening to the stepmom talk about going to Oliver, and she was just like, wow, she's like clinging on to this thing that like is not going to be better and like could potentially even be like worse than
Yeah.
what we have right now, and like we actually need to be planning for like survival. And so like her ability to see the world as it presents itself as the truth, I think is like one of her like superpowers, because it gives her the ability to be prepared for what's next, which is what we see at the very end of the section that we read for today.
Yeah. I don't have a response to that. But thank you for providing some clarity on the Afro pessimism. Like I mentioned the other class we had, like I don't really, I'm not too familiar with it. I've heard it. I understand. I think I have a general understanding of it, but not how it really functions. But I do see maybe I don't know, the negative feeling that may be provoked from that, or from understanding like, no, there may not be a better reality, and this is what you're going to have to deal with, you know? So I do see, well, I don't want to ruin talents for people who haven't read it, so I'll just stop. We have a new person. Oh, Veronica, did you have something? I'm sorry.
I did. Quickly, I just wanted to say before I fall into the background and start cleaning and just listening to y'all, I found at my local bookshop, they printed zines of the Book of the Living, Earthseed.
Oh, nice.
So I'm going to see if I can like scan it and turn it into a PDF and share it with y'all, because it's all of her, it's like all of the musings, like God is Change. It's the entire book's Earthseed Part 1.
Oh, great. That would be great. Thank you for that. And if you do, just I think email me on the Substack, and then I can drop it into the chat. Or if you have access to drop it into the chat, I don't know how that works.
I'm not sure either, but I'll let you know.
All right, cool. All right, I want to say this right. Mixgasm.
Sam.
Hey, what it was? Tell me how to say it.
Mixam.
Mixam. Hey.
Hi. Thank you for doing this. I read these books in anticipation for this class.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I finished Sower last month, and then I finished Talents like 2 weeks ago.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's pretty much fresh in my mind. But what I really appreciate about Sower is that she doesn't try to traumatize you. Like how I got it was that she's so, like someone said, just very logical. She's saying, read books on, the wilderness and plant cultivation and, just soap making and different things like that, so that there is no reason to fear. It's very much like, get ready sort of a thing. And what I was saying in the chat was that Octavia Lauren is she's studious. She reads a copious amount. And because of that, she's a student of history. She's very observant. And so what I was saying is that she's so meticulous to chalk it up to her being a prophet or being someone who's just a messenger of a supreme entity or, you know, from another realm, I think is really disrespectful to the amount of labor she put into, even in, okay, so in Talents, you know, the way she said, I mean, not to spoil it, but like when she was talking to Aubrey, you know, in chapter 1, where the attack happened at Dove Tree, I just really appreciate how she laid everything out, like, you know, the Crusaders and the Inquisition, and you know, the Klan, what they did, and Nazi Germany. Like, she's just, I don't see it as prophetic. I just see it as seasons, elements, the moon. All things are in cycles, and so she's just saying, if, you know, this looks like that, looks like something that happened previously.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. And that's something that I also made comments about earlier on when this whole class went viral at first, like that sometimes we do like to just chalk it up to Butler being prophetic when she wasn't. She was an academic in her own right, and she did a ton of research, which is why her archive is the largest archive by a Black writer right now, because all of her research is there. And so I totally agree with you. Y'all, I know y'all probably gonna get mad at this, but I want to say this. I'm looking at quoted material from the archive. Butler says Olamina is Doro. Protector, driver, owner, shaper, mother. She is the matriarch. She will find a way or make a way to the destiny. So I just want y'all to know that she's Doro.
You know what? That's on time because
I know that, and you know how I feel about that.
Hey. Okay. Mellow clocking in, babes. When I said to myself today, I said, oh, we're having this call, and it's the first call that we won't be talking about our arch nemesis somehow, some way, because he's hey. And God did. My God is so big. Wow, this is my opportunity.
I am looking at quoted material. This is what she says. Sir Maxim said, I just gasped. Doro is gone. I just want y'all to know, Doro is gone. But in Butler's mind, Olamina is Doro. Protector, driver, owner, shaper, mother. She is the matriarch. She will find a way or make a way to the destiny.
Can I say that? Okay, because we're only on the first half and she's still fairly young and we haven't really gotten into what she builds. Can I say that one? Yes, absolutely. And even at this young age, I feel so vindicated. Oh my God, it's so big. Oh my God, it's so big. Okay. Even at this young age, you can see the beginnings of the foundation. Could Doro have been this person if he hadn't been so terrible? Maybe. That's not what happened, though. Is Lauren, from what we know so far, the potential for her to use her, not her resonance, but her like what she will become for good or control? Absolutely. Yeah. And this isn't a spoiler. I think that just comes with when you are leading people or when you are in charge of people, it is very easy for it to go to your head. And when you are the person that is building a vision and you only see that vision, it's really, really easy for you to just accept that it's, if anyone is against you, if anyone says something opposite you, they are against you. And we're talking about a teenager. Like, we're talking about a teenage girl who may be like precocious and preternaturally like aware, but she's still a teenage girl. And you can see, especially at least in this very beginning, when she's so sure of herself and sure of what she needs to know and why her dad is like, her parents are playing her to the left, and then things unfold. It's like, damn, was she right or was she just stubborn? Because, you know, when we're young, we think we know everything.
Yeah.
So
we shall see. We shall see. We have just, I think chapter 14, she had just made it out of the wall, right? So this is the moment where we're about to learn more about her, because for the longest, for the first half of what I had us read, we're just in her head. We're learning about the world around her. We're learning about her community, what she's rejecting, what she's accepting. We're just seeing the world through her eyes behind her wall, right? And that is one of the questions that's one of the things I do want us to get to, thinking about a false sense of security or walls, right? But now the last chapter, the world has come crashing down, the community is gone, and they're about to make their way. See if they can survive. Go ahead, Tina.
Okay, so one of the things about this whole Doro thing, I did think to myself, if Lauren was around when Doro was doing his thing, he would have killed her. Because she would not have been, she would have, or if you look in terms around the patternist, she would have been like on the outskirts of being able to have any status or anything else, because with her ability to be empathetic in a way that when somebody got hurt, she felt that hurt, they would have saw that as a straight up weakness. And so, yeah. I was trying not to think like that because I was trying to get Doro out of my head.
But it's fine. I just want you, before we give her too many flowers, right? I just want us to stay grounded in the reality that when you are this leader, and in some places in the archive, she does say that Lauren, she creates a cult or a gang. She uses those words. And we'll begin to see why towards the end of the story, towards the end of Sower, but definitely in Talent, we'll see why she kind of categorizes this protagonist as such, or doing that type of thing. But yeah, she's not too far off. Now, she may not rule by that type of hand, right? That heavy hand and things like that, but she has to get what she wants. She has to build the destiny. She has to do these things. And when you have a leader who is hell-bent on doing these things, certain things come with that. And to Melou's point, did I say that right? Mellow.
Yeah,
to
Mellow
Melou's
is
point,
like the French or the Creole, like Gold Tigers. Mellow.
Yeah, Mellow. Thank you. To Mellow's point, this is a coming of age story. We're meeting her young. So of course, we know when we meet somebody young, we have sympathy for them. Like Mary. We met Mary young and we were like, yep, it's Doro's fault, until you start to see the world that she had a hand in creating. So we're meeting this protagonist very young, 13, 14, 15. She was 16 by the time 17. She's 17 by the time she gets beyond the wall. And now we're about to start seeing what happens, right? So I just want to keep us there. Okay, what else do y'all want to talk about before we get into the questions? Anything that struck you, the writing? I know y'all was dragging Butler for patternist, the pattern master writing. How do you feel about the prose here, the writing here? Anybody? Was it easy to get through, hard to get through?
I have one before I go on mute because I have this thought I've been sitting on, because I had read in an interview a while ago that, and you even talked about it, how people didn't believe, or she didn't even believe Lauren could be this smart, or this well-spoken. And I think I read this before I read any other of her other work. And to me, it didn't seem too unbelievable. The only thing I might have struggled with is this 16-year-old girl is not so temperamental, so wishy-washy. So we were all young women, and we know we're dealing with hormones, babes. But she seemed so laser focused on what she needed to do, and she seemed reasonable. That could be unbelievable. However, eldest daughters. So I found it read to me as if this could have actually happened to a child who was going through such a terrible thing, because when we were forced through such trauma, unprecedented times, we have to grow up. And I think that, to me, Octavia did such a really good job of writing all of these characters, and they weren't really one-dimensional, and you can see them and you can imagine them as if they came to life in front of you. So I thought it was good.
Yeah, and I think when you were speaking, something that I thought about was like there is no happiness here. Like when you're growing up in a particular world that's a hard world to live in, there is no room for joy in a lot of ways. There is room for temporary pleasure that she finds in the bushes with the boys, or in the, in the garage when they're hunching. But happiness, or the freedom to feel a range of emotions, I think that's kind of sometimes sucked out by the society in which we live. What y'all think?
I was just thinking in terms of the writing, something that struck me reading it. I think a lot of women can relate to this. A lot of Black people can relate to this. A lot of neurodivergent people can relate to this. But the anger that adults felt towards Lauren when she was young, and about her like know-it-all-ness, when in reality she was looking at the state of things. She was looking at the experiences and her understanding of it all, and coming to conclusions a lot like what we're saying Butler was doing in her life. So I do wonder if that was something that she experienced a lot too, and maybe hindered her forward speaking out, and rather led her to speak out in the form of her writing and her books.
Yeah, I think that I don't think when did I share that article? It was probably earlier on when I shared that Butler, her mother was a a cleaner for a white family, and she didn't want to be that. Her mother really wanted her to be a receptionist, but Butler always wanted to be a writer. And so she had these odds and ends jobs, but her interest in writing and reading wasn't necessarily respected by her family. And she kind of felt a way about that. So that could be a thing, right? Where she's seeing this young girl. Of course, Butler, I think the post is something about the pantry. She slept in a pantry for a long time. That was her bedroom. And so I think that a Black girl growing up, when she grew up, reading, writing, wanting to be a writer, or having aspirations to be a writer, was not respected because Black writers weren't necessarily respected, but also her mother did not affirm her in that way. So that could be potentially, another way she's writing herself into that story.
And also a Black female writer who's interested in science fiction or speculative fiction. She was interested in things that was culturally or whatever was frowned at, looked upon as, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was a white genre, right?
Yes.
White male genre, I should say. So when we do get Butler and Samuel Delany writing, he had a little bit more success at the time than Butler did. Those are the two Black sci-fi writers, or the ones who were known. But he had more notoriety than she did, simply because he was Black and male. But when you're writing in a genre where generally when race is discussed or Black folks are discussed, they are discussed as the alien. That is why a lot of Black people were adverse to reading science fiction and did not read science fiction. I think Butler's quoted somewhere in an interview when someone asked her, like, what good is science fiction to Black people? And she has this long response to it, but she's like, ultimately it gets you off the drawn out road of what everybody is saying and doing at that time. So now we have this resurgence of interest for Black people interested in the genre. But when she's writing in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there were not a lot of Black people interested in reading that type of work. And then if you think about the Afrofuturist movement, of course, Mark Derry, a white male scholar who's kind of credited with coining that term, but also we could look at Alondra Nelson, who had the Afrofuturism listserv. And this is where Black scholars or Black people would get together and talk about Black folks in the future and things like that. You all should probably, if you can, read her introduction to social text. She's really talking about Afrofuturism there. But it didn't really become a thing until a white man start talking about black kids who were interested in nerd culture, nerdy stuff. So that's the thing. Yeah. All right. I don't know how I got there, but here I am. Anybody else? We are good. Let's before we get in here, before we get to the questions, then I want to talk about the hyper empathy. I think it's important. I think it's fascinating, but I don't know if everyone read the Substack where Butler says that Lauren does not have hyper empathy. It is a mental health condition. She is delusional. How y'all feel about that?
I think that's a cop out because she was talking so much about how Emery has it and Gray has it. So is she
No,
just
not yet.
that
Not yet.
everyone?
We're not there yet. We're not at that part of the book yet.
Wait, what do you mean?
We didn't finish the book today.
Oh, okay. So you're saying up until chapter 14,
14.
it's
14.
14. Up until 14, it's just a mental thing.
Yeah. No, she's saying period. She throughout the whole series, she does not have this thing. But I just don't want you to give spoilers, but you can give your opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a cop out. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of weird because I can't continue with my thoughts without giving spoilers, but yeah, that's basically it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that it's if one of the gifts of taking this class is that you took us on the journey from Kindred all the way through the Patternist series and now into this. So it's hard to disconnect the touch points from one series to the next because you can see how it's building and you can see, especially with the Patternist series and now what we're doing with this, how there's connections. So if you can get to a Patternist or Doro or whatever else, it is not unreasonable to think that she has this for real, that it's not just that she's being delusional, that this is something that is there. If this is in the same world or this is within a certain time period, it seems like this is, this could be the effects of Doro doing what he was doing.
And y'all, I want to be clear that this isn't me saying this. Okay, I see y'all in the chat like, no, wait, what? No, let me just read Butler's words to you. We can of course discuss it, feel how we feel, but I just want to just give some context to what she's saying. And because I saw someone in the chat say it even made her bleed. She has these symptoms. And Butler says this is a 1996 interview. And if you're interested in reading the entire post on the Substack, it says mental health, hyper empathy, and parable of the sower. So Butler says she is the interview, and let me just read it. In an interview in 1996 with Stephen Potts, Butler addresses this head on. She says she's not empathetic. She feels herself to be. Usually in science fiction, empathetic means that you are really suffering, that you are actively interacting telepathically with another person, and she is not. She has this delusion that she cannot shake. It's kind of biologically programmed into her. And when Potts presses her I can't read tonight. When Potts presses her further, asking what happens when Lauren feels the pain of a wounded dog she kills to survive, Butler responds, "Oh, even if it's not there, she feels it." In the first chapter of the book, she talks about her brother playing tricks on her, pretending to be hurt, pretending to bleed, and causing her to suffer. I've been really annoyed with people who claim Lauren is a telepath who insists that she has this empathetic power. What she has is rather a crippling delusion. A crippling delusion is what Butler says. We can take her word for it. We can push back against it. This is what this class is about. But I just wanted to tell you what the author has said. This is not
a diagnosis.
Huh?
That's still a mental health diagnosis.
Yeah, it is, and it is a result of a drug that. And you know what's very interesting? If we do get to the short stories, we see the other impacts of mental health as a result of parents taking a government-approved drug in her short story, The Evening and the Morning and the Night, where the characters try to literally start digging out of their skin because they don't believe that it's a part of them. And so we have a mental health issue here where Butler is saying this is not real, it's in her head. And then we confront it. She fleshes it out a little bit better in the short story. But what y'all got?
Out loud, but to me, it's especially within the context of mental health and illnesses that we cannot see with our eyes. To me, it sounds like internalized ableism. It sounds like some things that have not been worked through on that. Because I was really confused to read that on the Substack as well, given that, well, as Sam said, no spoilers, but there were just certain parts of the book where I was like, how is this imagined? It doesn't make any sense, even if it's not something that you can biologically or visibly see. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, there are holes in Butler's comment, right? And if y'all want to read the entire interview, it's in this book that I generally read out of Conversations with Octavia Butler. There are holes in that logic because when we get to, as Sam was about to say, as Veronica's alluding to, when we get to the second part, then we'll start to see this more. But right now, Butler is saying this is a result of a drug. This is a result of a drug, and it is a shame that she carries with her. Yeah. I also think it's fascinating to be writing about mental health in the early 1990s. More specifically, a Black girl experiencing what we can kind of consider a mental health crisis, because mental health and Black folks have never been open discussions until relatively recently. And so if Butler's writing about this thing, I don't think anywhere in her notes she says anything otherwise, but she's writing about this taboo topic about mental health in the 90s when it is not widely discussed in Black and brown communities. What about the drug Parasecto? What you mean? What about it? You mean the one that makes them want to set fires? Is that what you mean? Valerie says that's a good point because she's empathetic to others' physical pain, but never their emotional pain. Okay.
One of the things that I like always wondered about the hyper empathy, because they're so focused on survival mode, like her and her father, I was always confused why they never like worked on some sort of like tolerance for her. Like when like what am I thinking about? Okay, when she was fleeing the community and everything was on fire, and like she like, you know, is falling down and like having to recover. And I was just thinking like, well, if y'all knew that this was one day going to be a possibility, why were you not running drills? Like, punch me and like keep standing, like work through this. And I don't know. I feel like that's like missing from this.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to reconcile that with the like, this is just, it's like a delusion. And also the fact that like, you know, her dad and her family wants her to hide it because it can hurt her.
Yeah, I think the reason why they may not have come up with a plan together is, the older generations were wishing for the good old days to come back. And that's something that Butler was critiquing in the text. They wanted to maintain, they didn't want to necessarily go anywhere. They just wanted to protect what they had and hope that the good old days would come back or return. But Lauren was always forward thinking. She had no point of reference for the good old days. They will soon learn that she's never been to a beach. She's never seen the water. Keith had this obsession with wanting to go to LA. Like there's so many things that she doesn't have a point of reference for. So of course she can imagine her way into the future in ways that her father and the older generations in the community cannot. So even though, there's a point in the text where he's talking of he's affirming her desire to put together an escape backpack, but he's just like, yeah, no, we just still not ready for that. And she's like, let me put the pew pew in the backpack. And he's like, no. Right. So I think that is that tension in the text between intellect, like intellectualism, and the elitism of intellect, right? Because he's a college professor. And then the very real reality of the people who are prepared to survive if said thing happens.
Yeah, you can't see me, but I am nodding along.
Yeah, and that is why I actually pulled that quote from the text on the Substack when she says, full of the title of it is You Can't Read Your Way into Survival. And there's this one liner when she's forced out of the community the first day, and she says, I was full of books, but ignorant of reality, right? Full of information, the ivory walls, you can read, you can do all this other stuff. But when you get in reality, how are you going to survive? And I think that was kind of a conversation that we had begun to have again with the California wildfires back in January. Like, who's able to survive this? Who's able to rely on their privilege and make it out, right? Because so much was happening. And Butler is showing us no matter how much you read, until you have to put this to the test, until the power grid fails you in America, right? Because we already see power grids failing people in other countries. Until that power grid fails you, you do not know how you're going to react and how you're going to survive. You can think, you can read, you can plan, but until you're forced on the street and start having to walk from LA, like in this text, people are going west to Oregon or trying to go to Oregon. They can't escape into Canada. Until you're forced in that situation, you don't know what you're going to do. And that is one of the reasons why I find it also difficult to read this book, because I'm like, I don't know. Like, one, being raised in the inner city of Chicago, I do know how to do that, but I'm so far removed from that life that if I'm forced back into that environment, it will be a struggle. It would be a struggle. Yeah. So Lauren has her backpack at this point in the narrative. She's ready, but she's also realizing that she's still largely unprepared.
Comment on that book quote that you said. Another thing she says to Joanne is that, well, Joanne says books aren't going to save us. And she says, well, nothing is going to save us. We have to save ourselves. And I really like that she said that to her, because Joanne was sort of like slowly losing like her mind, I guess, or she was just kind of going manic because, for the first time, she had never really heard Lauren speak the way that she's speaking. Like, we gotta prepare, we gotta get out of here. This isn't a safe place. And just like how you were saying, a lot of the adults, they didn't run drills because they did want to go back to the good old days. So Lauren was the only one that was saying, no, we should run drills and we should, prepare and get ready. And Joanne was basically saying, you don't know anything. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't read the future. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, actually, no one can. No, she said, what did she say? She said, you can if you want to. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She said, you can if you want to. It's scary, but once you get past the fear, it's actually really easy. So I really appreciate that she had so much knowledge beforehand, just being the eldest daughter, having to teach, classrooms of kids, and just having that responsibility. It really prepared her to be the person that she's going to end up being at, toward the end of the book and into the next book.
Yeah. And I think one thing, building on what you said, one thing that I really enjoy about Lauren, not the book, but Lauren specifically, is that through Lauren, Butler's about to take us on a holistic journey. So she's about to force us to kind of find ways to holistically respond and intervene on generational trauma, economic collapse. Like, you have to go back to the land to figure out how you're going to heal yourself in this type of economy. And that's one thing that I think that there is a study, or there was a leg of study called Healing Justice, that a lot of scholars were trying to think through and work through. Like, how did people who are from marginal communities, one, how did they heal themselves, but also how did they get justice from white America that was not rooted in white supremacy, or did not use the same tools, to borrow from Audre Lorde, to try to give themselves healing by using the tools that the master gave them. And so I think one thing that I do appreciate learning, right? I think someone said on the Substack that this seems like some type of guide of sorts, that we do. She is pointing us back to those intracommunal ways of being, of knowing, of healing, of journeying, if we will accept them. But in some societies, we're too far gone to appreciate those things.
Oh, so I have two comments.
So-
Two comments. So one of them is that privilege is one of the things that is infested in that walled off community.
Sure.
So everybody that's there, even if they're like, three families deep and, sharing a garage and all of that kind of stuff, they all feel somewhat entitled and privileged about that.
Yeah.
And if you gave in to what Lauren was saying, that would strip away that veneer of we're better than or privileged in a certain way. We shouldn't have to do that. It shouldn't have to come to that. And I think that was to me, that's Joanne, that's her doing it. That's Richard Moss going to get himself another woman and women and all this. Like, I'm going to do all of these things because I deserve this, or I feel like this is what, the way it should be. And I just felt like the privilege was just like,
for sure,
reaching through all of this.
But you all have met a privileged person from behind the wall before.
Yeah.
Blake Maceland.
Blake, yep. Yeah, that's what we said. Yep, exactly. I just thought that it just was very clear to me that was like, I'm not really willing to deal with this. And then trying to hold up the morals in terms of, their faith, the Christian faith, and trying to live in this situation like, some things that you shouldn't do, or you should live your way in this particular standard, and it's straight up chaos. They go to their shooting range and they see dead bodies everywhere, and wild dogs and all of this kind of stuff. But you still are like, oh no, we're gonna have this perfect garden in the back. It's just.
Yeah, really quickly.
She's saying that Lauren was delusional. I'm like, yeah, okay.
So really quickly, and I'm so glad you jumped in, Tina, because this actually kind of like fortifies my idea. This book is, or at least the beginning of the book, is about delusions. Everyone in this book has their own version of a delusion, quote unquote, right? So if she's delusional and imagining her empathy and what it does to her, and these people are delusional in the sense of you don't need to prepare for what is inevitable because you are protected by a wall or you're separate from the rest of the world. And when confronted with the collapse of that delusion, you see that they become upset because it breaks their reality. Even her father, for example, her friend, for example. And I wonder if, whether intentionally or not, Octavia Butler knew that when she was writing, because yes, restorative healing, going back to the land, is key. And it's also like the very first thing that we have to do is accept what is true about what we are experiencing. And that comes with a lot of, removing the delusion from our minds. And I think that it's so interesting that we're seeing it across a wide swath, and we're going to continue to see it across a wide swath, because even if you take those who are the people who set things on fire, they're delusional. Now, they're delusional as a form of psychosis, but they're still not a reality. And all of this, not all of this, but particularly Lauren's journey is around like, how do we become true to ourselves? And as D'Angelo says, never betray our hearts.
Yeah. I think it's a good place for us to just actually go to the question on that, so we can kind of unpack this illusion of safety. And if you're looking at the Substack, it is the second question, the illusion of safety and the politics of suburbia. And the question says, Lauren's community exemplifies a walled, self-contained space intended to shield residents from societal collapse. However, this setup also fosters disconnection from broader issues. How does Butler critique the myth of suburban or gated immunity, and how might this analysis resonate with the present-day conversations about privilege, race, and neighborhood-based segregation?
I feel like this illusion of safety is the same as saying of the delusion of privilege that privilege causes, and I think it's a lot of where we find ourselves today, people who've lived in suburban safety, etc., voting in ways based on their quote unquote Christian moral compass, but then saying, oh, well, those bad things that you think will happen, that would never happen, and we see that so much in this book. So
Yeah. It is an illusion. The gated community gives you the illusion of safety, right? Even if, say, a gated community backs up into an underprivileged community, which a lot of communities do, the idea of the gate, the wall, right? It does give you this suburban safety, we're better, superiority complex that a lot of people have been speaking about on this panel right now. But not only does it provide this illusion of safety, it does disconnect, right? It disconnects everyone behind that wall from the reality of the world that they live in. They're in, as you all said, a delusion. They're in a delusion, and then it's not until that community is invaded that they're yanked awake from, from that slumber. Even if it wasn't a peaceful slumber, they were still able to sleep in some type of peace.
Can I?
Like, you can go.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, just quickly. Exactly. I completely agree that this is absolutely commentary on privilege and race. And it makes me think of what Bell Hooks said, which was part of the conversation, part of the construction of dominator privilege is you don't have to think about what are those other people thinking, feeling, hoping, dreaming. I think the people inside didn't care about, the grassroots criminal organization, the Pyro Gang, and their needs and everyone else's. I think is one of the questions too is how they kept themselves from knowing the needs of other people, whereas that was a main concern of Lauren. So yeah, I think that's exactly what it's talking about in terms of privilege and the othering of other people. That's not our concern.
Yeah. Because and Tina, you can go right after I just follow up with that. I think Tina was mentioning the garden in the back, but then there are these other markers of privilege, such as clean clothing, right? You can't go outside of the wall with clean clothes. So that's just an easy identifier of some type of privilege in the society. Tina?
Yeah, I was gonna say, when the first break-in happened, and the father was like, "Okay, we need to have these patrols," and half the community was not up to doing the patrols. Like, I'm like, somebody has broken in. They're crazy on the outside, and like, we need to do these patrols, and you need to also go to targeting practice and all the rest of it. But they had all of these gates around even that, like, okay, well, you can't go to targeting practice until you're 17 or 18 or whatever magical number they had for that privilege, for that to start happening. It just was so seated in the past as opposed to reality. Like, this is what's happening at our gates. If we're going to stay in here, we have to be diligent. It was like, yeah, but we got keys and we've got the glass at the top of it. As soon as the first person broke in, everything should have dramatically changed, and it didn't.
I don't know.
So I also think about how, to your point you just made, everyone wants the security, but they don't want to put in the work. Nobody wanted to do the actual work of like maintaining. And I think that is quite indicative because you see it now. Yeah, you see it now with like community, right? Like you have to be in community with people. You have to be inconvenienced. You have to be, I won't say agree, but you have to deal with things that you don't want to deal with. And I think part of it is like when you're privileged enough, you get the safety and security in the community without doing too much, without having to sacrifice anything from yourself.
Yeah. But I think also Butler is pointing to the fact, as you all both are saying, that survival is a communal effort. You cannot survive as an independent. So even though we can critique their wall and all of the privilege and the illusion of safety that they do have a community. And people who do not have community in this time, they're at risk, right? And let me see if I can find that quote when she's talking about you must respect community. It's either in her, okay. She says, benefit the community and you will benefit. Harm the community and you will suffer. right? So she's ultimately kind of showing us that, yes, even if the world is on fire, you need one another to make it. You cannot make it as an individual. And we see that in the text when Keith is talking about the man he robbed to get his stuff, right? The man was nice, but what happens? Keith robs him. Because you are a target if you are single in this world and in this time. And so everyone needs one another, but everyone is not willing to pull their same weight to ensure the safety of the entire community. And we'll see where that gets us as we continue reading. With that in mind, let's go ahead and go talk about the paints. That's the last question on the Substack. Is the outsider's gaze, the pyromania, and class critique. And it says the paints serve as visible threats, but also as social commentary. How might Butler be using their fascination with fire and destruction as a metaphor for class resentment and political frustration? Why does she make it significant that some were once rich kids? And what does this say about economic instability and the fluidity of class identity and dystopia? And the thing that kind of really just made me think about this question was I was reflecting back on when the California wildfires were, taking over California. And it was before the news had said people were setting these fires, right? There's some of this was arson. I was like, in my mind, I'm like, some of this is arson. There's no way that this is happening and these small fires are breaking out, like the rich are burning things. And now in this text, we see that the rich, or the once rich, the previous rich, the prior rich, they are some of the main people who are setting the fires, but they're not just setting the fires to privileged communities as we will generally think of it. They're privileged in the way that they have a community, not because they are prospering economically. Right, so that's that's what made me think about that. Do I need to reread the question? Because I know I just started talking. Okay, I'll reread it just in case. The paints serve as visible threats, but also as social commentary. How might Butler be using their fascination with fire and destruction as a metaphor for class resentment and political frustration? Let's start there. Yeah, remember who the paints were?
Yeah, could it be?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I'll just say really quickly that, not to go too far ahead, but I was going to say, what we know of them at this very moment is that one would presume that they are those who are less privileged or are those who are not in a place of power. And they are, I guess, the lower side of society, and they're just expressing themselves in the best way they can on a government and society that has completely failed them. And that felt like, and that does feel like, too on the nose. And it also, and I say this as someone who hates this phrase of why would you destroy your own neighborhoods? I hate that phrase. But when you don't have neighborhoods, true communal neighborhoods of what they used to be, and you're just a group of people in a set location, it is easy to understand why these people are, quote unquote, destroying their own neighborhoods, because they're not actually serving the purpose that they're meant to serve. And I also think of fire from the perspective of it is a cleansing. Fire is alive and it cleanses things so that new things can be created, or new things can take shape where the fire, burned everything down. And at least up until this point, all we can see is the destruction of it. We don't get to see the rebirth. We don't get to see what comes of this. And I think that Octavia did a good job of laying the foundation of, we automatically assume, one, that again they're poor and not privileged, and two, that they're hurting themselves more than they're hurting others because the other people are behind the walls.
But I wonder, we don't see them as privileged in the context of how we would generally classify privilege, but they do have the privilege to escape due to the drug. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean they're breaking their delusion. I mean they're breaking the delusion that we talk about of like they are seeing the world in whatever way they see it as it truly is because well what the drug makes them feel is nice and because they are destroying a thing maybe on some subconscious level they're just acting out um, a need right that serves a purpose for their group because they burn things down in groups. So
Right.
they're acting out a need that serves a purpose for their groups. Now we don't know what that purpose is truly, but it seems to be as close to community and community minded, like collective consciousness, as we got so far in this book.
Yeah, but so as you're speaking, I'm also thinking like their need to do this. They were once rich. Their need to do this, they're able to set fires at will. That is still a privilege, right? This world still belongs to us. We can burn this down and terrorize you as long as we want to, even if we don't have the economic mobility that we used to. We still have in our minds, the class privilege.
They're chasing the high. So if you, they said the side effect of this drug is that it's better than sex, right? It's better. It's supposed to be better than orgasm. It's better than sex. And who is and probably in their mind, who is it hurting? I
Right.
mean, because they can burn down everybody else's compounds or whatever else. I can still go back to if my compound still exists, I can still go back there. I'm not, it's just like this. I'm chasing a high like an addict. And on top of that, and this is the outframe of that. And there's a detachment sometimes from people who are wealthy or who are rich from individuals who are lower than that. It's not like your pain is real,
Yeah.
your suffering, your inconvenience, like, and you see that, and I think that you can see that played out. Like, okay, so what? The eggs are $10 now. Like, well, who is that hurting? You can take care of that for the next 2 years. You'll be all right. Like, that's not a big deal. Do you know what I mean? So I just think a lot of that is from the mindset that there will always be something, and that I'm chasing a high, and then finally, again, I'm gonna go back to privilege. Like, I'm privileged in a way that this makes this okay. Who's gonna stop her? Because there's no police force. And if you do the police force, you pay them. I have money to pay them.
Yeah.
The people I burn their house down, their whole community, they don't have money for that. So what?
Yeah.
Exactly. I was going to say that because of the abject poverty and the unchecked lawlessness in the entirety of the country anyway, because Butler said she was writing basically a third world version of the US. I think that's why they sort of did what they did. The drug was influencing them, and then also there's no checks and balances, like there's no justice. So I think maybe it comes from sort of joy it was giving them, but also the fact that it gives them power.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is what I was trying to get at. Like, these are people who are used to having power, right? Economic power, freedom, mobility. They are the former rich in air quotes. But even in their lack of, richness now, or lack of wealth now, they're still behaving as the privileged class. Though they don't, like my grandma used to say, have a pot to piss in and a window to throw it out, they're still maintaining that status quo. We can take your community from you at will. We can afford to live our lives on drugs if we choose to. You all cannot, because you all, in our minds, are considered the poor.
It also could, I agree with that so much. And it also could be resentment. How dare you be happy? Or how dare you be doing well and living well? Do you know what I mean? Like, my great grandmother used to say, you don't ever want to be too happy around certain people, because they will look at you and then think, how dare you be happy? How dare you, like, how dare you be, if I'm going through something
Yeah.
and it's hard for me, how dare you survive, or how dare you do some other stuff? So, like, if you are struggling because you're not used to, I don't know, getting your lattes or whatever, right? You're not used to, stuff is taken away from you, and then you look around to people who used to work for you or who used to work in your home or whatever else, and they seem to be, doing well, like being able to take care of themselves. That could be very triggering. Like, I'm gonna burn it all down,
Yeah.
so you don't have nothing, so you know how it feels for me.
Yep. Yep.
Can I read something actually? Because I just found this quote in chapter 13. It just says, people are setting fires to get rid of whomever they dislike, from personal enemies to anyone who looks or sounds foreign or racially different. People are setting fires because they're frustrated, angry, hopeless. They have no power to improve their lives, but they have the power to make others even more miserable. And the only way to prove to yourself that you have power is to use it. So I think the rich kids, probably did it for that sort of thing.
Yeah. To still exert that power over the people who are now behind the wall that they no longer have access to, right? So we're still going to take your stuff because we don't have the economic power that we used to have, but we still have the privilege, and we can still make you miserable, and we can still unhouse you and displace you and do all the things that people do in oppressive cultures, right? In capitalistic societies. We can still do what we want to do, and no one's going to check us because the law is somehow on our side in this society.
Yeah.
That's tough. That is a tough one.
And I don't think that, and I might be wrong because I might be getting, for some reason in my head, I have disconnected the people, the paint people and the fire starters. And maybe that's wrong, the pyro people from the paint people. And what I thought about was when she came back to the community, the fire starters were gone. Somebody else was there doing other stuff. So like you didn't even stick around. Like you didn't even stick around to like loot and get all the good stuff and do all of these things. You set the fire and then booked.
Because that is the high. The high is watching the fire, the dancing of the fire, the burning of it. And when it's over, the thrill is gone. It's time. We don't even want your stuff. That's how sinister it is. We don't want your stuff. We just don't want you to have it.
Right.
And then we're going to move on. And then the people who were living on the streets are coming into the community trying to scavenge and get all of the things that they can get. Because these are the individuals who live outside the wall, right? So we have these different classes of people and categories of people in this narrative that kind of makes it a little bit, I mean, of course, Butler says in her notes that you don't really pay attention to them. They're on the peripheral. But when they come into focus, we do have to focus on them, right? And so we do know this is Lauren's story. This is Lauren's life. Her community, we feel sad in a way for all of the people who have lost their lives. And I'm wondering, and this is not a question on the Substack, but did you all catch those AI references? I think there is chapter 10 when Keith comes back and he's talking about the technology that he discovered in the other communities or in the other abandoned buildings. They were very futuristic. That's going to actually begin to set us up for the Xenogenesis trilogy in a lot of ways, and the technology of the Oankali. And so I was wondering, did anybody catch those references kind of, to virtual reality, not having to just watch television, but you can actually.
Yeah, because I thought about Meta. So I don't know if y'all remember when Meta had put out the Oculus or the VR headset, and that's something I've done at work, like rolling it out. And so I thought it was interesting because I know, like as someone who deals with that and sharing that, I also find issues with it because it goes back to my statement about delusion, about you do not want to be involved in the world that you are living in so much that you are willing to like separate yourself from it in a way that does you no good in the long run because it's completely made up. And we still don't know like the long-term effects of being in VR for that long. Like the short term is we had people who like they got queasy. So like you get sick when you put the headset on and you first, like it's a type of motion sickness that probably went away by the time Lauren is a teenager. But then over time, like what does that do to your ocular like receptors, like your eyes? What does that do to your body? Like we already are too sedentary. So it was very interesting how the escapism that was the choice was, I want to live in a reality, but I want to live in a reality of my own making.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see the effects of that in Talents. There are passing mentions of what happens when people are in VR for an extended period of time and what happens to the family and the societies. But yeah, we're here. I was going to say we're inching towards it. No, we're kind of here already in a lot of ways. Anybody else? I mean, we got less than 10 minutes, so it's not no even use for us to go to another question. I found another quote that I want to say. I did mention this when we were reading the Patternist series, and I was like, just put it in your pocket. But now it's time for us to take it out of our pockets. I mentioned that Butler says that Lauren is what Anyanwu would have been if Anyanwu had succeeded. Human using themselves to the ultimate, all to the greater glory of God. So not only is Lauren Doro, there are aspects of her that Butler sees as mirroring Anyanwu. I want us to think about that because, Oh, that's want to say something. Because I don't think we can fully get away from all the other. Somebody, Quish says she both of them. She is in a lot of ways. We haven't gotten to see her in her full glory yet, right? Benji's mom said, but Lauren isn't a believer in God. She is a believer in a God. She's a believer in a particular type of God. I don't think I put that on the Substack yet, but I was writing it earlier. She's not a believer in the God of the King James Bible, but she is a believer of a God. Right. And in her mind, you shape God. I think I did. Did I release that? Or it's maybe scheduled. I think it's scheduled. Yes, it's scheduled for May 2nd. I was like, what? I know I wrote it. But she is a believer of a God, just not the Judeo-Christian God of that Bible, of the Bible. Yup, she is. But I also don't think that we can get away from that God. I don't think we can interrogate her thoughts of Earthseed because we haven't gotten enough of it yet. And we haven't seen how people interact with it yet. But I also think we should start thinking about what happens when other people or followers kind of prop someone up as a God. So in Lauren's case, I think when we start the second portion of the book, we should start thinking about how people deify her or how she's propped up as a God in some way. Naturally, that's what happens in cults. But yeah, I think that's beneficial to think about. All right, y'all, we got 5 minutes. Where y'all want to go? Yep, Phil, I agree with you.
I know you've read a lot of Butler's like personal works. Did she say anything about Lauren's dad? And like, obviously, I guess he went looking for revenge for Keith. Is that what happened?
No, she doesn't. She doesn't spend a lot of time on her father in the archive. There's very little. I think that ultimately, as she's working through the note, she has to remove him. She has to get out of his shadow. And I think there's the Books of the Living kind of talks about something not being able to grow in the tree's shadow. So he has to, be removed in order for Lauren to be able to grow or have the confidence to be forced out of or to live outside of his shadow and also outside of the community. So she doesn't spend a lot of time in the archive on the supportive characters as she does on the main characters.
I had a problem with understanding the transition of Keith,
Okay.
her brother. Like I just want to be a man or something. I want you to give me the gun or whatever it is. He goes out there and pretty much he gets, I don't know if he got raped or he got beaten up really bad. He had all these horrific things happen to him. Mm-hmm. And then you go back out. Mm-hmm. And you go back out and now you're doing all kinds of craziness stuff and you just it was hard for me to understand, the thinking behind that kid and what he thought the advantages was, because like it's clear, like, oh, they just want to learn to read and write because they got all these electronics, and I'm teaching them how to use it. I'm like, okay, so once you teach them how to use it, why they need you? Like, just like, seriously, like, why would they need you? Why would they keep you around? Like, what are you doing? You're like 14. Like, what do you think is gonna happen?
It's what Veronica says right here in the chat. He was seeking his own version of power. He wanted
Yeah.
to be a man in this sense. He wanted to come of age, but he wasn't coming of age as fast as he felt Lauren was, right? And so you have this, he's at this age where things begin to change, I guess, in boys, and they feel like, I need to be the man of the house, but you can't be the man of the house if your father is the man of the house. And then, they get into that fight. And he's like, I'm going to go outside and become a man. And it is that idea or that desire to become this man, right? This person who was feared, this person who can protect, that gets him unalived. And even Lauren, she makes some type of commentary in the book when she says he's dangerous. Had he been allowed to live, he would have been a danger. He would have grown into a dangerous individual, right? And so it was just his own desire to have his own power, before it was time for him to have it.
And okay, so I know what I said about how well written Lauren was as a teenager, and people thought she was. I thought it was very on the nose for Keith, because not just because he's a boy child, but because he's a boy child growing up in this world that has taken so much of the delusion of control. Like, we own this world and we can move about it. And so he had to like stake his claim. And to your point, I really think he was so young, but he was full of hubris. Because if he had become older, if he had grown to a man, imagine like the terror and horror he would have wrought. Because then once he got up to a position of power, he would have sought vengeance on those who might seem like the people who did him wrong.
Yeah.
Because now his whole character arc is just, now that I've got what I came to get, which is power and like being someone important, now I'm about to get back at you bitches. You know what I mean? So he couldn't do that. And he had to be snuffed out.
Yeah. And he did not, and as we saw, like, even as he moved throughout the community, he didn't care whose lives he put in danger, right? He wanted to go outside. He wanted to have the pew pew. He wanted to do all of these things, and he lost the key. Like, all of these things he did because he wanted to feel like a man, right? And it did not matter that he put everyone else's lives in danger, just as long as he scratched his itch of being able to puff out his chest and say, I'm a man, I'm a man, I'm a man.
Well,
Oh,
so like when he said, like in the chat, when people are calling him a narcissist, I was like, thank you, because that was the word. Because that's the word. Like, I'm thinking it's all about me, and look, I want you to love me and pay attention to me or whatever else. And because what was the purpose of keep coming back? What was that gonna do? Like, you want people to see you differently, or think about you in this glorious thing, and you're just bringing death to the door. Like, I like, after all that happened, I just kept wondering, so when are his so-called friends gonna break in? So.
Yeah. Sam, you had something?
yeah. In chapter 4, she talks about Richard Moss and how a lot of men prove that they're men by having multiple wives, and some upper class men prove that they're men by having one wife and a lot of beautiful, disposable young servant girls. So I really like reading books by women because they really address what's not really often spoken about. But I think it's really clear with Keith that it absolutely applies that this traditional, gender role dichotomy that they really kind of cling to, which is masculinity and wanting to fit into whatever they deem that is.
Yeah, it's dangerous, especially if unchecked at that age. It's dangerous. As I saw someone in the chat says, to be fair, as a teacher of teen boys, that's a lot of their mindset. That it's immaturity. It's really immaturity. And that type of immaturity could have, because we don't know if his friends did break into the community. We don't know, right? Butler did not draw that connection for us, but they could have. People see him coming in and out of the gate, or saw him coming in and out of the gate. They're more perceptive. When you're forced to survive by instinct, you are very perceptive. I know this for sure. When I was teaching in maximum security prison, they pay attention to everything. Things that I would never even notice, you notice, because your life depends on it. You have to always be alert in that way. And so we don't know who was watching, and who was paying attention to the normal rhythms and the patterns of the community. So they could have been Keith's friends or people who were just watching close by. All right, y'all, we're about to shut down. Any last thoughts? Today went by kind of fast. Yep, Lauren definitely did mention that if he was able to grow up, he was going to be a monster. When's the next meeting? Next Wednesday. Next Wednesday at 6 p.m. we meet here. And we finish the book next week. Okay. All right, y'all. If nothing else, it's been.
One thing I want to go on the record to say, you brought Doro up, so you're gonna have to deal with it. That's all I'm gonna say.
I'm just saying, think about the tendencies, the characteristics. That's all I'm saying.
I'm just saying, you brought him up, so you can't chastise us when we bring him back.
What I'm gonna do? Exactly.
No, I'm just saying, Doro ain't got nothing to do with this society. Not directly. Not directly. But we gotta start reading Lauren. Like, do she have some Doro-like tendencies? Because y'all know we like to give people the benefit of the doubt when they deserve the doubt. Saying. All right, y'all. Oh, for the questions in the chat, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm sorry. And then the replays are always uploaded to the Octavia Butler Mixtape Course YouTube. Link in the description or my bio or something. They're uploaded the next day. So if y'all miss it and y'all just joined the class, you can catch the replay. But we'll see you next week. And make sure you subscribe to the Substack. I drop a lot of writings over there and a lot of insights from Butler's work. So if you want to read that, you can click the link in my bio. Other than that, y'all, it's been real. Good to see y'all. Thanks for coming back. And I'll see y'all next week.
See you next week.
Good night.
Night.